When you put down your fork after dinner, where does your leftover food go? Have you ever worried about ending world hunger? Making sure that every man, woman, and child everywhere had access to nutritious food? Well, for many, leftovers are thrown away to become food waste, which contributes to the whopping 1.3 billion tons of food that is wasted every single year. Now, this translates into about $2.6 trillion that are lost simply due to food waste. Eliminating this waste could more than end world hunger. This, however, isn't just a money problem, as 8% of the world's greenhouse gases are a direct result of food waste. Unfortunately, this social, economic, and environmental crisis is majorly impacted by people like you and me, as 43% of all food waste in the US is generated from our very own kitchens. Hello, I am your host, Mike Lake, and in this preview, I will be discussing a new way to tackle the issue of food waste with Bill Bergen, the CTO and founder of SaverPack, a solution that triples the shelf life of delicate produce while reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases associated with food waste and solving the issue of food deserts in our cities.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, welcome to all of our listeners. I'd love to introduce you to Bill Bergen. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer of SaverPack, a solution that reduces food waste by extending the shelf life of production. See, this is what I mean about starting over at the beginning. Whew. Uh, can you tell I'm reading? I hate when I can tell I'm reading, but
It was pretty smooth as far as that goes. Yeah, and you know what? I always hang up on produce and product, right? So it's like the spell
yes.
check always wants to switch to the other, and I'm like, no, it's produce. And but even it's uh that's the word that it's funny, produce. It seems like I get hung up on that word all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other one, I was practicing this. The other one is smallholder farms.
Oh,
That's phrased
and
like,
that is so awkward, but that's the term. And
I
I
know.
don't like that terminology, but that is the term for what it's a specific word with a specific meaning, and that is it's very awkward to me also. Yeah.
And by the way, I just remembered one thing I forgot to mention is the very first question I'm going to ask you, just kind of introduce yourself to it, but is, how did you get involved in SaverPack?
Mhm.
And I don't mean that from, like, oh, I applied, or you know what I mean, but
Yeah, sure.
it's more like, what was the inspiration? What was
Yeah. The origin of and that's a funny story too. So I don't know if you've heard it or
perfect?
not, but yeah, yeah.
Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, welcome to all of our listeners. I can't wait to introduce you to Bill Bergen. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer of SaverPack, a solution that reduces food waste by extending the shelf life of produce, while also supporting rural smallholder farmers all around the world. Now, Bill, I'd like to first learn a little bit more about you and how is it that you became involved in SaverPack and tackling this issue?
So it's sort of funny. Probably 15 years ago, I was working a day job as a mild-mannered aerospace engineer, and I noticed my lunch had this problem with condensation inside of it, and I'm like, well, this is unacceptable. And as an aerospace engineer, it's particularly as a systems engineer, environmental systems engineer, I knew how to control it, and so I created the SaverPack product, pretty much basically our champion product that night in my kitchen, knowing how thermodynamics works, how to leverage the dew point temperature. I basically invented that product in, you know, almost immediately. I understood the problem and the solution because I had this background, this strong background in environmental controls. And I've been using it every day to protect my own lunch. Ever since, it wasn't until I saw the commercial application 10, 15 years after the fact that I
Oh,
wrote the patents. Yeah. And when the patent was approved, then it was like, oh gosh, I guess I need to, I guess I really need to move forward. What's the next step? And so, yeah.
well, God, I wish I had a rocket scientist around to help me solve all my problems, not just the lunchbox.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about the issue that this is actually addressing. Um, how would you define the issue?
So food waste. Food waste is a massive problem, and we can double or triple the shelf life of very delicate produce items using this technology. So food waste is a $2.6 trillion a year problem, and we can triple the shelf life of blueberries. We can more than double the shelf life of spinach and arugula. And so, this doesn't just allow smallholder farms to reach new, lucrative, distant markets that were unavailable, but it also alleviates food insecurities with a longer shelf life, produce can now be shipped into underserved markets.
Well, that's fascinating. At Leading Cities, one of the issues that we come up against all the time is food deserts and equity in terms of access to healthy foods. Um, but something that I really want to underscore here is you mentioned the $2.6 trillion that's lost every year to food waste. Now that's something, let's face it, we're all to blame for that, right? I mean, we all have our part. I can't tell you the number of strawberries and blueberries that we've thrown out in my house because they sit there in that refrigerator, whether it's in the pint that they came in or the bowl we moved them to, and they eventually turn fuzzy. We've all seen it. But to really underscore this and really highlight the fact that $2.6 trillion, I mean, that's a big number for a lot of us to wrap our head around. But imagine this. Some estimates say we can eliminate global hunger with $7 billion. Now, the highest estimate to eliminate total hunger in this world is $265 billion. I mean, a fraction of what we could be providing people in terms of avoiding the food waste that we see every single day in our grocery stores, in the shipping containers, in our own refrigerators. So I really want to congratulate you on tackling this issue and putting your rocket scientist skills to work here. But let's talk a little bit more about this problem. So you mentioned, for farmers, this is allowing them to access new markets because by using SaverPack, they can actually ship longer distances because produce can stay fresher longer. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
And one of the other things, coming back to the food insecurity piece of this, I remember some time ago reading the statistic that something like 70% of people in the inner city get their groceries from convenience stores.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but a convenience store is where I go for a candy bar or a bag of chips at best. It's not the place you go to find, fresh strawberries and a head of lettuce.
Right.
So one of the reasons for that, I would imagine, is that it's just not economically sound for a convenience store to try and stock their shelves with such produce because it just won't last on their shelves long enough before they can sell it. So it becomes more of an expense than a revenue stream for them. Yeah. But that changes with SaverPack. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, so there's a lot of places where food goes to die. I mean, you have retailers certainly have there's some food waste happening there. A lot of food waste happens in the home. Some happens on the farm. But if we could remove that risk of that valuable shelf space in these convenience stores, if we can assure that that produce is going to be sold, it eliminates that risk for them.
And I'm assuming this also has an issue with price, right? Like that people living in food deserts, I know, pay more. Do you have a sense of what that impact is to the wallets of people?
Well, so I know I can't speak to urban food deserts specifically, but I know on average the household throws away almost $3,000 a year. I think that's the average household dollar value for food waste in America.
That's incredible. I want to say I recall that just people in the inner city end up paying something like twice as much,
Yeah, I've heard that too.
by shopping at these convenience stores rather than your typical grocery store. Um, I am familiar with one study that was done, and they compared 1961 to modern day. But in 1961, over 75% of the urban population had easy access to supermarkets. For anyone living in the suburbs, I mean, it's what we just think of as, going to the market.
Yeah,
From 1961 to now, that went from over 75% down to 20%. And those are almost always people who have to travel outside the city if they want to access a grocery store. So, and when we talk about food deserts, we are really talking about an issue that I think so many of us just take for granted, is especially in a country like the United States, but it's everywhere, that we just have access to high quality, healthy foods. I think a lot about what it means to have Saver Pack.
mhm,
And I mean, you mentioned that it triples the shelf life of produce. Um, I know my 3-year-old would love to know that his blueberries, which is his favorite, would last in the refrigerator a little bit longer. There's nothing more disappointing to him
oh,
than coming home to know that his afternoon snack is molded.
yeah.
But I do want to talk specifically about SaverPack and tell us more about what is this solution? You held it up, you showed us, but
Sure.
explain to us
Yeah.
how does this work? And not the science necessarily, but how would
Yeah.
somebody
So
use it?
in a nutshell, so this is an absorbent paper structure. It's plant cellulose. It's compostable. There's adhesive on one side. There's also a version of this product that's about half this size where there's no adhesive, and that's the produce solution. This is actually the hot food delivery solution that worked with hot food. They work on the same principle, and that is to remove moisture out of the air very quickly. So we leverage the dew point temperature to pull moisture out of the air. We can remove 50% of the air moisture in less than a minute. And that's the hot food performance number. Um, but we all know you have a cold drink and you see condensation on the outside of the drink. Condensation is forming there because it's below the dew point temperature. And that's how our product works. When you have temperature fluctuations inside of produce packaging, our product it stays below the dew point temperature during these momentary fluctuations, and we force the condensation to occur rapidly on our absorbent structure. The condensate is then wicked into the absorbent structure and trapped away from the food. By creating a drier environment, we stifle the microbial load, which would otherwise form on the produce and cause rapid decay.
So once again, water is our enemy.
Yes, yeah. Wet, damp
Um,
food. It's you want to keep your food dry and crisp.
they say water is the most destructive force on earth, and you think of flooding and things like that, but
Yeah,
I now have a whole new appreciation for the destructive nature of water, right in my own refrigerator.
yeah.
Um, so, you know, the 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 patch you talk about and you demonstrated, is this something that, I've seen these types of things, at the bottom of a raspberry container or whatnot. Um,
Sure.
and is that something that the manufacturer, um, the packager of produce puts together, the grocer, the farmer? Should it be
Yeah.
me?
It's
How does
happening.
SaberPack
Yeah,
actually
sure.
enter
So
the system?
yeah, it's happening. So sometimes the packaging is done at the farm. It's co-packed. Sometimes it's shipped to a packing center. Um, but these pads that you talked about, they're already around, but they're they don't do anything to remove moisture. They're just absorbing, juices and whatever is in direct contact with them, to keep the packaging from dripping onto other packaging and things like that. And our product can be a direct substitute for these pads, for those applications. So they don't have, a farm doesn't have to buy. They don't have to buy both. They could buy ours, and ours will do double duty.
Okay. And what about the average consumer?
We're beginning to sell B2C. So our first launch into the consumer space will be through Costco, and we're working on a QVC, platform as well. And then we're looking at a direct to customer through our website, or maybe through, well, maybe not Amazon Prime right away, but Costco is definitely going to be the first B2C application, and that's happening. It's now, it's imminent. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting to hear. Um, so let me ask you a question. We've covered the issue. We've talked about SaverPack and the amazing technology that you've created, and let's talk about the impact. Um, Tell me, look out, whatever it is, 5, 10, 50 years,
Yeah.
whatever that horizon you choose. And let's assume that every person, every farmer, every grocer has, the SaverPack solution in
Yeah.
place. What does that mean?
So it's massive reduction to food waste, but also it means people now have an opportunity to eat fresher, more nutritious foods. SaverPack works particularly in the produce space with delicate produce items where there is no other solution. These produce items like berries and leafy greens have such a short, they're so delicate, they have a very short shelf life. We're not talking about apples or mangoes or avocados that already have a 5-week shelf life or 2-month shelf life. We're talking about these items that have a 5 to 12-day shelf life. So people have the opportunity to eat better food because they're throwing away less. And then also, transportation. We have a blueberry farmer in Guadalajara who's now shipping to China, but they're not shipping it air freight anymore. They're shipping it sea freight, which saves them a fortune. If you have to air freight products, that's going to destroy your bottom line. So it's also about being more efficient. So, and then of course the carbon footprint that comes from sea freight versus air freight. Yeah,
And
and our
I was
product is
just gonna
compostable. Yeah,
I was just going to ask about the carbon impact.
yeah,
That's another thing that I think we so often overlook is how each of us is contributing to carbon emissions with every blueberry, strawberry, head of lettuce, or whatever it is
yeah.
that we buy. Can you talk a little bit more about the carbon aspect of this?
Sure. So greenhouse gas is easy. I know that's not carbon,
Well,
specific, but
greenhouse gas.
yeah, the sustainability messaging. So our product is made out of plant cellulose. It costs pennies. It's not expensive, and it's something that farms and retailers can afford to implement, and without impacting the produce. In fact, there's some studies to suggest that by reducing food waste, the price will go down for consumers. But so our product is again, it comes from the ground. It's cost pennies. It's compostable. We just passed our compostability test out of a lab in Belgium. It went very well, and and there's other costs in reducing food waste. We're also reducing water consumption that went into that produce that was being thrown away, and the labor costs and the fuel costs that went into farming the land for food that gets thrown away. And so that of course is eliminated. And yeah.
And we're not talking major investments here. One of those patches is,
Right. So there's no infrastructure. So some packaging solutions. So there's modified atmosphere packaging is a possible alternative. But you have the huge cost and infrastructure requirement, and it's very expensive. You're basically, vacuum sealing, removing the oxygen and replacing it with nitrogen for every package. You can imagine the infrastructure and complexity that goes into that. Um,
yeah.
we don't require any infrastructure. You can, it's shelf stable for over a year. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. Um, it's good to go. You can put it into existing packaging, part of your existing operations.
And it just costs pennies more,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Well,
yeah. Eight
amazing.
cents. Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, 8 cents per unit. That's what we're
Yeah.
looking at. Yeah.
It really is incredible, and the impact you can get from that 8 cents investment.
Yeah.
Listen, our time has gone by so
Oh.
fast and way too fast. I have so many more questions to ask you, but most importantly, if anybody's interested in learning more, what's the best way to learn more or connect with SaverPack?
Info@saverpack.com.
Perfect.
So and SaverPack, I think you have it spelled out here some way, but somewhere, but it's SAVRPAK. So
Bill, thank you so much, not only for your time today and being a guest here on A Preview of Tomorrow, but for the impact you are having. And hopefully we can end world hunger. We can reduce the food waste that we're all contributing to, and we can even reduce greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions at the same time. It's been an honor to have you here. Thanks so
Thank you,
much
Mike.
for joining us.
my pleasure. Okay.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guest today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.